Hello, everybody. Today we're speaking with Paul Tebow III, founder, CEO, and chief ILMer and role model at 10 Books a Home, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to cultivate the intrinsic learning motivations, or ILMs, of preschoolers.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on, Oscar and Dave. Really appreciate it. First time here on KZSU, so I'm super excited. So I guess I'm going to start off with asking anyone who's listening to imagine a school where every day, Monday through Friday, the whole day, you only learn about things that you're naturally motivated to learn about. And imagine from the time you're about 5 years old until you're 18 years old, every day, Monday through Friday, the whole school year, you only learn about things that you're naturally motivated about. That comes out to about 15,000 hours of learning about things that you're naturally motivated by. And what we think an ILM is basically something that's inside of each and every one of us, and that if discovered and cultivated will lead people to doing things that they are passionate about, that they find purpose in, and that they develop very deep skills in. Examples of ILMers that we think exist in real life are people like Elon Musk, or Steve Jobs, or Johann Sebastian Bach, or Marilyn Monroe. A lot of these people who we look at as kind of icons, we actually think that what makes them or made them who they are is not their talents or their intellect per se, but it's actually the way that they chose to spend their time. And that's what we believe an ILMer is. It's someone who chooses to spend their time, their free time, doing things that they're naturally motivated by, and that over time they begin to amass skills, knowledge, and abilities that generally outpace general population. And so what we've done here is we started a program for kids in East Palo Alto, low-income preschoolers, who are starting kindergarten below grade level, sometimes up to 3 years below grade level. We started a program for them to see what happens if we can provide a home tutoring program that gives them weekly ILM lessons, once a week for 1 hour for 2 years. And so far, we've had this. The ILM program is what it's called. We've had it for 5 years, and we have three years of graduates now, and we actually track their outcomes in order to understand our impact on the achievement gap. And all three groups of graduates that have went through our program are either at or above grade level. And they're at or above grade level in East Palo Alto or the Ravenswood District, in the Palo Alto Unified School District up in Portola Valley. And the really interesting part of this is that 90% of them are English language learners. And when you look at East Palo Alto and English language learners in East Palo Alto, 91% of kids are below grade level there. And when you kind of zoom out and you look at California, English language learners are actually the largest group of students in California. And when you look at them, 81% are below grade level. So we think that our approach is doing something pretty tremendous, and we're excited to continue growing that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So it's interesting when you started talking earlier about people that we know who found their ILMs. I think a lot of people have a tendency to think that those people just sort of popped out of the head of Zeus, fully formed. But it really does take some early intervention to get, or early exposure maybe, to get people to realize what it is that they want to do. Because I think a lot of kids are probably hungry for something that they don't really even know exists. And it sounds like that's part of what you're doing at your organization, is giving them the opportunity to see a lot of things and letting them follow it until they really develop their ILM to a point where they can begin to pursue it actively on their own, or at least guide it a little bit more.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we actually cultivate ILMs. Mm-hmm. So all of our tutors, we call them role models. They actually are the cultivators of the ILMs, and they're all volunteers. And so what we do is we have a house in East Palo Alto, that's basically like a Disneyland for preschoolers. We converted a major portion of the house into basically what looks like a preschool. There's more than 2,000 different learning activities that are in it and available to borrow and bring to the lessons. And then we took a garage and we converted it into a 5,000 book library. And all the books are donated in there. And again, the role models are choosing from and picking books based on what they're noticing that their learners or ILMers are naturally motivated by. And so what the volunteers do is they come in every week, and we call it the ILM loop. They come in every week. Well, they're trained, and I actually do the trainings right now. We're still startup phase, but within about a year, we'll actually have another trainer because we're opening our second site down in East San Jose. But they go through a training, and then they're assigned to an ILM specialist. It's a full-time salaried staff who's basically an expert in ILMing, who supports the volunteer and the family over the course of the time the learner is enrolled in the program. And the specialist helps the role models to identify what the learners are intrinsically motivated by in the lessons. And then each week, the specialist or the role model, with the assistance of the specialist if they choose, comes in and chooses activities that they saw the learner was motivated by the week before. That's kind of the basic loop. We call it the ILM loop. But we don't just stop there. Actually, at the end of each lesson, we leave ILM homework. So I had my lesson this last week, and my learner was really motivated by puzzles. Actually, she has been motivated by puzzles the last 5 lessons, to the point where she was actually crying to her mom between lessons because she was falling asleep. But she really wanted to finish her puzzle. But because she was falling asleep, she knew she couldn't. And so she's like, ah! So that to me is like ILMing to the max right there. And that puzzle I left as homework. And actually, we leave a lot of homework. It's the first time you'll ever see kids actually crying because they want homework. And so the kids in between lessons are actually ILMing. And then the parents, they actually participate in all the lessons. And they agree to do reading between the lessons as well. So the parents are learning how to actually cultivate ILMs and then work with their children in between the lessons. And this process just repeats week after week after week. And what you see is kids that will take an interest in puzzles, in building, in singing, in crafts, in assembling things. And what we are able to do is we have what we call an ILM trajectory chart. So we can actually say, okay, well, if they're really interested in Play-Doh, for example, they might actually really be interested in cutting. And if they're interested in cutting, they might be interested in building. And if they're interested in building, and so on and so forth, until you actually map these things to like majors that students here at Stanford are studying, like engineering, architecture, CES, English, theater, film. And it's pretty incredible to be able to see the rudiments of something like a full-fledged degree in theater occurring with a 3-year-old in their living room with a volunteer very, very innocently every single week.
Yeah. So what does a typical lesson look like? You said you bring some kids in, they play with Play-Doh and do puzzles or things like that.
Yeah, so like the way that we actually start lessons, when you if you were just starting our program, the first lesson you would have with me as your role model, I'd walk in with what's called a learning bag, and it has about 17 activities in it, and I would literally dump it on the floor. And Oscar, what you would do is you would literally look at what I dumped on the floor and begin to curiously be attracted to certain activities. So there's like Play-Doh, there's beads, there's an activity mat that you can, a laminated activity mat that you can write on. There's some word books, some song books, some writing books, a whole spread of activities you could look at. And then based on whatever you start grabbing toward or gravitating toward, I would then begin the cultivation process. And basically what we do to cultivate is we use what's called the ILM attribute wheel. real simple description is it has about 8 different attributes on it, like letters, numbers, colors, shapes. And if you were grabbing at Play-Doh, what I would be doing as the role model is I'd be talking about the letters like Play-Doh. Play-Doh. You spell Play-Doh P-L-A, and the first letter's P, P-P-P, or numbers. Oh, look, if you rip the Play-Doh in half, it goes from 1 ball to 2 balls, right? And so what I would be doing is noticing and pointing out the different attributes of whatever it was that you were working with. And this is what we actually train role models to do, and we actually do ILM coaching sessions, so we'll go into your lesson and observe it and then give you targeted feedback so that you as the role model can learn how to actually cultivate those ILMs. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we would do just for an hour. It looks like playing. We actually call them learning parties. The kids think that they're playing. They don't realize generally that they're learning, but they are learning. And each week for that 1 hour lesson, Oscar, I would come over and I would just try to figure out what is it that Oscar really likes. And from week to week, I get better and better at understanding what you like. And so I can bring more and more targeted activities for you. And then I leave those with you for homework. And then I come back next week and I'm surprised because you're doing things like I came back to my second lesson with Sol is her name, and the mom says all week she was saying oval because we were doing this book with shapes in it. And she's like, she was just oval, 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 and she's never said that before. Or 2 lessons later, we were cutting with scissors. And in the middle of the lesson, the mom's like, this is the first time she's ever cut in her life. And now this girl's a cutting machine, like hours and hours of cutting every day. And you can literally see her fine motor skills have improved dramatically over the course of like 3 weeks just because she thinks she's playing with scissors.
Yeah. One quick question I had was in terms of volunteers, it sounds like it is a very... some volunteer, when people volunteer with organizations, it isn't you don't need a lot of training necessarily. You go somewhere, you need to help do X, Y, some data entry. Maybe you're working with clients, but it sounds like you have a very specific training program. Maybe you talk a little bit about that and how people can, decide whether they have the time or the bandwidth to sort of get into it, because it sounds like it may be more than just, once a month type of volunteer thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic requirements for becoming a volunteer role model are that you need to give 1 hour a week. And we ask you to do that for 6 months. Okay. So it comes out to about 26 hours of a commitment over a 6-month span. And then what we do in exchange for your 1 hour a week is we will pair you with a family based on your availability. So we do lessons Monday through Fridays from 12 as early as we start up to the last lesson starts at 6. And you just choose the day and the time that fits your availability, and then we'll schedule lessons. And that's actually one of the trade-offs that families make to participate in the program is they have to actually make themselves available based on the volunteers' availability. And then what we have are different practices in place that support role models traveling for work, traveling for vacation, just things that pop up on a day-to-day basis. And for example, if Oscar, you needed to leave for a week for work, we would actually set up a sub-lesson. And so the sub-lessons when your learner actually comes into our office and then picks out activities while you're gone. And then this way, the learner can have what we call learning continuity. They're receiving their learning, their 1 hour of learning every single week, while you, Oscar, still are able to travel for work or travel for a school event or something like that. And as far as the kind of the week-to-week requirements, really all you're doing is you come to a training, and we're going to teach you all about what ILMing is. We're going to show you and teach you our tools, which is really the ILM wheel is what we call it. We're going to do a lot of practicing, so you're all ready to go. And then for your first 4 lessons, our ILM specialists are going to come to 2 of them. They'll come with you to your first lesson and then your 4th lesson. And they'll sit with you and watch the lesson occur, and then they'll provide targeted feedback to help you to speed your learning up about what it is that the learner likes to do. Between lessons, we actually will make recommendations for different activities that you can bring to your next lesson. So if you don't have a lot of time on your hands, we can actually go ahead and make recommendations. And then if you don't have time to drop by our office, we do what's called a fast food LAR pickup. And so literally you can drive by to your lesson, and we will literally run outside of our office and give you the activity, so you don't even need to get out of your car. We got photos of it on our website to prove it. And we actually are willing to start lessons 15 minutes late, so that a lesson only goes 45 minutes instead of an hour, so that role models can pick up activities, because what's most important is that the learner's ILMing during a lesson and then has all those activities as homework. And that's going to get way more bang for the buck than just having an hour lesson that a kid might feel kind of pooped out at or uninterested in. And so basically it comes out to about an hour a week, and our specialists are there to support the role models and the families to make sure that the learning curve stays very, very low. And once the learners get into the groove of ILMing, they are very, very advanced at telling you what they want. And that makes your life even easier. And our volunteers come from across the spectrum. So here at Stanford, we have volunteers that their majors are biology, engineering, architecture, English, MBA students, law students, MD students, computer scientists or computer science students, chemistry. And then lots and lots of employees of Stanford also role model anything from the Athletic Resource Center to the business school. We have transportation planners, repertory theater employees, School of Medicine, academic operations, dispatchers, you name it. And there's probably someone from Stanford that's role modeling. And probably the reason why is we're only two miles away from campus. It's only an hour a week, and we're really, really flexible on availability and making sure that we can support you when something pops up and you're not able to get to a lesson.
Yeah. So what's the waiting list like in terms of people who are waiting for...
I have a community waiting.
Yeah, okay.
So if you become a role model,
Yeah.
you get a learner. And that's actually pretty amazing, is that just by signing up as a role model, a family is going to be admitted to a 2-year program. As far as what our goals are every year is in East Palo Alto, 500 kids a year start, or Ravenswood School District, which encompasses East Palo Alto and East Menlo Park, 500 kids a year starting kindergarten. We serve 30% of that group. So each year right now, 30% of kids that are starting school in Ravenswood are graduates of our program. And we believe that by pursuing this model, that our 30% can influence the other 70% positively. And we've already seen a lot of evidence of that. Like I said, we've tracked 3 years of kids so far. And we can see that we're actually closing the achievement gap, or they're actually closing the achievement gap. But the other things that are happening is teachers actually call us and ask us if we can send kids from our program to their kindergarten classes. So we're enabling teachers, parents. Our parents are out spreading the word and bragging about their children and how much they learn. And this is influencing other parents. And then finally, you have our students are in the classrooms. We, I would say every month we get a letter from someone, from an alum, and they're getting Student of the Month. And one of the most common awards is that they're mentors and peers and helpers and tutors to the other kids in the classrooms. They quickly become the class leaders and seek to help the other kids. And it's understandable why, because in kindergarten, kids are very, very malleable still. So what it means to be cool can be to be a avid learner. It doesn't necessarily, cool isn't something social yet. It's very, very unknown what cool is. So if a kid comes in and they're rocking and they're rolling and they're loving learning, this is going to influence their peers. And it's pretty amazing to watch that happen and to know that volunteers are driving this. To me, that's the incredible part. Volunteers are driving all of this success.
Yeah, are there any other ways besides becoming a role model you can volunteer at 10 Books a Home?
You bet. Right now, we're doing a video research project. My learner, Danny, has autism, and we are actually watching him nudge off of the autistic spectrum. So we're doing a video project that's actually going to code some of his lessons in the beginning and some of his lessons where he is now to show some of the dramatic changes that are taking place. And we're working with research scientists. We're working with scientists on that. So we have research projects. We have IT people come in and help us we use Salesforce to help us how to figure out how to use Salesforce better. We have finance volunteers, days of services. People make our Play-Doh for us. People organize our library. Minus the 7 paid employees that there are at 10 Books a Home right now, pretty much everything else is volunteer run. So if you have professional or technical skills, I, after 8 years of doing 10BH, have become expert at figuring out how to match you with a high need that 10BH has, something that is kind of an ILM to you, right? Something that you feel like you really want to contribute to, but also is going to do something good for a cause that you care about.
So you say you start kids, like you get preschoolers, so that's like 3 to 4, right? Around that age group. How do you work with them after they've gone through your program and after they've gone through a few years of school?
Yeah, so my long-term goal, we got to found an ILM school. Mm-hmm. That's what we got to do. For now, when we're talking about kids that are coming up through 10BH, we're trying to prove 4 things simultaneously here. One is evidence of closing the achievement gap. When I say achievement gap, I mean academic achievement gap, how well children are performing academically in grade school. And so we collect report cards of our graduates, and we look at 12 subject areas. And again, they're at or above grade level in all 12 areas. All 3 years of them. The second piece of evidence we look at is, is the ILM program preparing our preschoolers for kindergarten? So we're actually doing a study right now that is being funded by Mark Zuckerberg that's looking at English language development and Spanish-speaking and English-speaking children, that's looking at literacy and numeracy developments and self-regulatory skills. We don't teach any of that. But we see them developing at massively fast speeds in those areas. And these areas are considered very important for kindergarten readiness. We're also, the third piece of research we're looking at is evidence that our program is boosting preschool performance. Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, if I get my kid into preschool, then I don't need 10 Books a Home. We have an unpublished study already with a local preschool and that looked at kids in our program who are in the preschool and kids that are in the preschool but don't have 10 Books a Home. 7 areas these kids were kind of quote-unquote tested in. Our learners were basically edging at the top, the highest score you could possibly get, versus the kids who were who were just in preschool alone, were somewhere on average to a little bit below average. And then the fourth area that we look at for evidence that our model works is developmental trajectories. So we accept all kids into the program. We have kids with cerebral palsy, autism, speech delays, language delays. You name it, we accept you because we think that ILMing works for everybody. I mentioned earlier, we have a project that we're doing right now, a video project that's going to show some of the developmental progress that a learner with autism has made in the first 8 months of the program. And then most of our learners who come in with speech delays, because the Ravenswood Family Health Clinic in East Palo Alto that services the whole community, they actually refer their patients to 10 Books a Home. They actually literally write prescriptions for 10 Books a Home. They generally come in with diagnosed speech disorders or speech delays. Almost 100% of the time, 6 months to a year, these kids are undiagnosed. Even more impressively than that, they come in Spanish only, Spanish speaking only. In 6 months, they're fluent in English. You would never know that these kids were speaking only Spanish when they started the program. Mm-hmm. And so you take all of that, and what does that equal? Well, when you start kindergarten, Oscar, I think what you've done fundamentally, we tend to think of things in terms of skills and behaviors, right? So when you start kinder, you got your literacy, you got your numeracy, you got your art, right? Yeah. And we measure kids and think about kids in those ways. Well, 10BH thinks that what's actually going on is something in the brain. So while our learners are progressing through the program, their brains are developing. So even though we're measuring these things like letters and numbers and colors and all of that, what's actually happening is their brains are beginning to understand how to make sense of, transform, and then produce information. Because this is the world around us, information. Mm-hmm. And so why are kids doing so well in kindergarten? Well, because their brains have learned how to interpret and transform and produce information at faster and deeper and more analytical rates than kids that have not had the opportunity to ILM. So that's kind of the short answer to your question about mm-hmm. like what do you do when these kids, you give them an ILMing program until they start kindergarten, and then what? Well, we actually think that we've set them off to a really good start because we've actually increased their functional brain development, or we've optimized their functional brain development. But the bigger picture is if we really want to do something big, then we need to make sure that when they start kindergarten, they can continue to have those opportunities. Because if we can see in a tutoring program this kind of an impact happening, just imagine if these kids could have that opportunity in their day-to-day activities at school.
Of course, you can donate to 10 Books a Home, right?
Oh, yes, the money.
Yes, of course. There's always the money part.
People can donate by becoming a volunteer role model, or by donating their professional or their technical skills to, or by donating monetarily. And so all of those ways to donate are actually located on our website. Website's super easy to remember. It's 10bh.org, 10bh.org. And you'll be able to see how to donate. You'll be able to see how to volunteer. And also, if you're interested in learning more about our learning model or our impact or our research, that's going to be the hub where you start. And from there, you'll be able to see everything else.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in to KZSU and talking to us this fine Sunday, Paul Tebow III. And yeah, thank you for telling us about 10 Books a Home and how you can volunteer and what you guys do for the community in East Palo Alto, and how you help kids close the achievement gap and how you help them progress through life.
Thank you for having me. It was I'm a long-time listener, first time on your show, so I'm loving this.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll have you back.
And I would love that.
All right. Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thank you.